It's really important. There we got it. It's really important that you stop and think about it yourself. You should be able to self-identify if you've got a conflict. And hopefully this checklist that we'll go through next, and you may come up with some other ideas, and if you do, we'd love to add them to the list of what you might have to think through. And one of the ones that comes to mind in living in Maine anyways, is the school funding conflict. And I think I mentioned that a couple months ago. And whether when the legislature is looking at how they're going to distribute money, the impact on your local district, and how do you as a local board member resolve the issue of what VSBA might want to be doing. And so if you can self-identify that you've got a conflict, and at least bring it up and have that discussion with your president, with Neil, with Sue, and then with the board, if it seems that it needs to be, discussed at that length. If you're unsure, I would highly recommend you have that conversation with Neil, or or in the future, if it's a different president. But have that discussion about why you think you have a conflict on a particular issue. Do it before the meeting. Don't get involved in the discussion, and then if at all possible, and then decide that after the discussion has taken place that you need to recuse yourself. Really, if you're looking to serve the mission of VSBA, the best time to make a decision that you have a conflict is prior to any discussion. Okay. So if we look at our checklist that you have, the first thing that was listed was, does this issue impact you or your family? Think about, I don't know what that particular issue would be, and maybe as we get into the vignette later on, you may see an impact on that, how that can impact you. Anybody got any suggestions about how they could have a conflict that might impact themselves or their family? Okay.
So, I mean, I don't want to let it go, right? So I can share one, not me personally, but I have been in a situation where I had a sitting board member was the spouse of our athletic director.
Okay.
And that caused quite a few conversations in my district.
I'm sure it did. And how was that resolved, Neil?
Not well, to my recollection.
Okay.
I mean, I think so. We struggled with this idea of, does that person then recuse themselves from any discussion around athletics? Do they recuse themselves from budget discussions, where the budget discussion revolved around whether or not we wanted to put in a new turf field for the football? It kept coming up over and over and over again in a lot of situations, some which were, I would think fairly obvious, but others that were a little bit more obtuse.
Okay. Dan, I see you had your hand up. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I think Jim had his up first. I'm happy.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I actually brought this up, I think, at a previous meeting. But I think the upcoming, and you mentioned this in Maine, but the upcoming legislation relative to school funding in Vermont is going to put a lot of school board members in a position where their local school board has a position different than the VSBA. I will not be in that category because I'm pretty sure my school board is going to support the proposed legislation. But I know have good friends who are on boards in towns where they simply are going to disagree with the stance that the VSBA has already taken. Mm-hmm. And I guess I feel at this point that the thing to do is to be honest and open above board about that. And VSBA has already has adopted its own stance on this. So I don't think we'll be voting again on it, although if we do, then that would be the point, I think, to say, look, I'm in a conflict here, but help me out with that. Am I on the right track here? What do you suggest?
Well, I would suggest that because VSBA already has a position on it, that you're right. I mean, that would possibly be a conflict if you felt like you couldn't be supportive of that. The one thing I always say to board members is once the decision is made, you really need to be, if you can't be supportive, be quiet. And because the last thing you need as an association is for one of your members to be out talking against a position that your association has taken as a whole. Your obligation to the association, it would be to be, I would say, supportive first. And if that you absolutely can't be supportive of it, just quietly sit by and let it unfold.
I guess just to follow up on that, though,
Yeah.
let's pose the little vignette here ahead of time, perhaps, that a school board has taken a stance in opposition to the upcoming legislation because they feel like it's detrimental to the students in the town, and a school board member would then be they got two choices. One is to follow the lead of the allegiance to the VSBA, and the other one is to follow the allegiance of their local board and the students that they represent. And you may not just be able to sit quietly through both of those, for sure. So
That's so true. And what I would tell you is if you're sitting on a local board and that's been the decision, you have to, if you are going to testify, you need to make sure that people realize you are only there testifying on behalf of your local board and nothing to do with VSBA. And no pressure on the association to change their stance. That's been decided. But to make it clear to anybody that you're speaking to, you are speaking strictly on behalf of your local board. Is that okay, Dan? Jim?
Yeah, I may have a follow-on to Dan's, but I was just going to bring up the point that we just heard about, which is one of our school board, VSBA board members who was also the town clerk.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just curious if you have any thoughts on, you have those situations. That's one that the state of Vermont considers a marginal sort of potential conflict. But, how do you deal with that? Because honestly, the school, I guess the town clerk being on the school board doesn't sound like a horrible thing to me.
No. In fact, in Maine, the only positions that can't be held concurrently is selectman and school board. So you could be a town clerk. In that particular case, I mean, it would really, I think in all, to have made that clean for her town and where she was being opposed, probably she had to step back from being town clerk during the election or something and ask if they could have somebody else serve in that capacity for the election. Because that is, to me, that it would be a conflict if you're there all day overseeing an election that you're being, elected to. Although if you're the town clerk and you're being elected, I mean, at least in Maine, that they would still be overseeing the election. But most town clerks in Maine are appointed by the selectmen, so it's a little bit different, I guess.
My quick follow on to Dan's was just, the VSBA takes positions in its resolutions, and we revisit those resolutions every year.
Right.
So, honestly, if you have a disagreement with an existing resolution, you always have the ability to bring a new resolution that in a way could be disagreeing with the existing position, but that seems like a logical process.
Well, and your resolutions, I am, if I remember correctly, are adopted by your delegate assembly. And so, yes, you're right. You can, always bring in change, you should be always looking at your resolutions to see what needs to change. Okay. Suzanne?
So, on one of the two local boards that I serve on, our outgoing superintendent, if there were any teachers that were on the board that were not working for the district, but worked for another district, he, made those teachers recuse themselves during any negotiation pieces in executive session because he thought we might go tell the district that we worked for what was going on, which was kind of bizarre.
Wow, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, I fought him tooth and nail on it. I think I was probably the only teacher that refused to leave the room. All the others said, okay, well, we'll just leave. And I'm like, I'm not telling anybody. I believe in my oath and I'm not going to tell anybody, but the place that we have the biggest issue right now, and this is why I'm asking, is we have 7 school board members who ran under the guise of the national organization Save Our Schools. And their whole purpose for getting on the school board was to make sure that the board could no longer close any small schools. So, but they won't tell you that. Now that they're on the board, they absolutely positively deny that they're part of that organization. So many of us, well, the other 6 of us, feel that that is a conflict of interest. But, you know, they don't see it as such. So I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, unfortunately, many people run on a single issue. And, you know, if they are part of that organization, I mean, as a board, and I'm guessing that VSBA has done some training for local boards on conflicts. Or it's something to consider anyways, but, as far as them being on the board, well, and they've got the majority on the board, and are they holding offices in their Save Our Schools coalition?
They were smart enough that once they got on the board, they resigned their positions, but yet they still hold private meetings with Save Our Schools and yeah.
And it's the majority of the school board is holding private meetings?
Yes, because they're spread out over 3 towns.
It's, are you weighted votes? And I
No.
don't mean to get bogged down. I
No.
could talk with you, you know, or have that conversation with Sue. I don't want to get bogged down into local politics, but I mean, in Maine, that would be illegal to be having the majority of a board have a private meeting, period. And so there may be something to look at there.
Thank you.
David.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little slow on that.
That's okay.
I wanted to also respond to what Dan raised. I think there are a couple of issues, not just one. I think that there's the discussion when the resolutions and the positions are being formulated. And then there's the issue of what happens when you are from a board that diametrically opposes what's going on, and you happen to wear at least 3 hats. You're wearing the hat of the VSBA, and you're wearing the hat of your supervisory union, and you're wearing the hat of the board that serves the supervisory union. And all of them have slightly different perspectives. So the first part, it seems to me that it's really, and I think you referred to this earlier, I was a little bit late, but I think you referred to this earlier. I think it's really important when an issue is being presented that there be a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different viewpoints. And if somebody stands up a lot and happens to be taking a contrarian view that seems to be disruptive, that's something I learned a long time ago was called loyal opposition. That's somebody who's making sure that the organization is aligned and not just kind of skidding past things and sliding around corners, and making sure that it's being held to an honest standard. And there's a difference between loyal opposition and self-interest that disregards the best interests of the organization. So
Mhm.
I wanted to make that distinction. And then the other one was the whole thing about wearing 3 hats. I really appreciate your comment about then just keep quiet. Because if we're forced to choose which hat is most important,
Mhm.
there's no question which hat I would choose. I
Right.
have to choose the constituency that originally voted me onto the original school boards. So I would have to submit my resignation. And if that's the ultimate goal, then just state that up front and I'll do that. But so those are my perspectives on some of those aspects.
Okay, and David, I did not mean to give the impression that you shouldn't feel a commitment to your local board in any way. I think the mission of VSBA is to provide for all the students in the state versus just your local district. And if you are, and one of the vignettes that we'll talk about talks about a financial impact on a local district and give you guys all an opportunity to discuss what the conflict is and how are you going to resolve that. And I think the important thing to remember is if VSBA has a resolution that's on the books, that becomes the position of your association. And my comment was, what I intended to get across was, do not start speaking out. You as a board member have an obligation not to speak out against what VSBA is saying. And attack that position. If you need to support your local board's position, then you need to make sure that all of the people that you're talking to understand that's your position as a local board member or your union board member, not representing VSBA. Okay? Does that seem reasonable?
And then-
Yeah, no, I think it makes absolute sense. And you actually give us the freedom because I did become involved, and so did Jim Salzgiver, did become involved in actively working with our legislators and playing a role as board members in trying to represent a different perspective when the resolution went before the legislators. So,
Yeah, now I'm not saying you should be talking about you shouldn't be trying to influence other board members on VSBA board. I didn't mean to say that. But you can advocate unless you're at a delegate assembly where the resolutions are being adopted, then you're free to speak your mind at that point. But once your delegate assembly speaks, that becomes the position of the board. Okay.
One question in the room here before then we go to Gaston.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an issue that comes up pretty regularly, actually, in our district. Locally, doesn't affect me. Often we have situations where we have a parent who has students in the school. And we get into discussions about the configuration of our staff. The size of our school is such that we have some grades that have 1 teacher and some grades that have 2 teachers. That we're right on that cusp. But we don't have 2 for every grade, depending on the exact configuration. And we often find ourselves in situations where a school board member has a child in one of the grades, which is where we're considering the issue of allocating 2 teachers instead of 1. Any thoughts on how to handle that? Because what happens sometimes, and this has happened several times now, is if the board places the 2 teachers on that grade, there are accusations that it's favoritism.
Yeah, and I mean, really in that.
It makes perfect sense, but
I'm sorry?
Yeah. Sometimes it's the right decision no matter what, as a neutral person, right? But
Right.
I
I mean,
the more active the board member with the student, is involved with, the more problems we have with pushback from the community.
Yeah. It's, and that's a tough one. And I was there as a parent and a school board member making those decisions. And I guess what I say to local board members about something like that is, you've got to decide, can you make the best decision for the school system, or are you making the best decision for your individual child? And you've got to decide which hat you can wear during that discussion period and that vote. And if you can't be objective about what's right for the school system in that case, then I believe you need to recuse yourself from that discussion. Now, you're gonna, generally speaking, I would tell you that I would expect the staff through the superintendent to make that recommendation. And it's certainly, I would expect the board members and you as a parent to ask the appropriate questions about how did you come up with that, and explain the philosophy behind that. But it's a really tough tightrope, and we discussed that, I think, at the last session, to be that parent and to be a school board member. And you do occasionally have those situations, especially in the small schools.
Can a board chair help come to the right approach here?
Yeah, I think the board chair really should be able to direct the conversation and hopefully help phrase the questions for you, and what the fine line is, and then bringing it all back together into the discussion about wherever you're headed with this. The board chair is really an important component in any, especially controversial discussions. And I would highly recommend that the board member involved have a conversation with the board chair about how best to approach it.
So Terry, I do want to maybe go to Gaston because he had his hand up, but then maybe I think we ought to move into the other part of the training this evening.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're running out of time, aren't we? Yes, Catherine, go ahead.
That's Gaston. Hi.
So
Terry,
Gaston, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
That's okay. So I just wanted to clarify, in the state of Vermont, you can in fact be on both the select board and the school board, and that
Okay.
those two are actually considered two different municipalities. But
Oh,
that
wow.
being said, as a member of our local select board, as you're going through all of this, I am in the back of my mind thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not really thinking about, those conflicts. So, but I will moving forward. So anyway, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And in Maine, you can't, because in most cases, selectmen have to also make a recommendation on the school budget. It's not done by the school. The school board makes a recommendation. Typically, the select board gets involved, and then it's a town vote, depending on the size of the municipality. But okay. So again, on the checklist, does the issue, and we've really discussed this, impact my local school board? And many times it's going to, and you're going to have to think through it. A lot of this is just being reflective about what the positions are. And as Gaston said, thinking about being a selectman and a local school board, and which hat am I wearing? What's the appropriate way to approach this? That's a lot of what we're trying to get at with this conflict of interest checklist, so that you're thinking it through and you're not, I think oftentimes when people have a conflict, they don't even realize that they've not thought through that process. And they can get themselves into some conflicts with, citizens, other board members, whatever, without intending to. I do believe anybody who serves on a VSBA board, and most people that serve on local school boards, they have really good intentions. They don't mean to cause conflict. another question to ask yourself, am I asking a board member or a staff member to favor my position over what's in the best interest or what's in the resolution for VSBA? Important question to ask yourself. Am I associated with another organization or entity that would find VSBA's position in conflict? And one of the vignettes we'll go through if we have time talks about that. And how are you going to handle that? And in the case of being a selectman and a school board member, how does that play out? And are you associated with another body that determines the outcome of an issue that is subject to VSBA's advocacy? So, think through that. Keep this near if you've got some controversial issues coming up. And just review it and think about where you're at and honestly be able to say either you feel that you can act in the best interest of VSBA's mission, or if you can't, how are you going to proceed? And you have a very clear conflict of interest section of your code of ethics that tells you what's going to happen. But that's after the fact. Try and prevent getting to that point. Don't cause any angst on the board because you haven't considered what the issues could be. Okay. So Carrie's going to break those of us that are online into groups. And we're I want you to spend a few minutes. We'll take about 5 minutes for the first one, and then we'll do a report out. And then if we've got time, we'll go into a second vignette. And here's the first one. VSBA passed a resolution at the last delegate assembly in support of a statewide minimum pay scale. There's been legislation introduced to set the starting pay for teachers at $40,000. Your local district starting pay is $24,000, and your local taxpayers will not be supportive of the increase. Is there a conflict for you with the VSBA position? Where is your obligation, and how should you handle this issue? And so Carrie's going to divide you in, and I guess, Neil, everybody in where you are is going to be in one group. Is that?
I'm gonna split them into two.
Okay.
It's right there.
So, do you want me to put that back up, put that on the screen?
I am about to put it in the chat.
Okay. If you can do that, that would be great. And so we'll have about 5 minutes. I think Sandra's in one group and I'm in another, but we're just observing. And so anyhow, with that, Carrie, if you can split us up, that would be great.
I'm trying to do that.
Any
right.
questions before we do that?
Well, perhaps a factual question. Does the resolution specify the minimum pay scale or just say a minimum pay scale?
Oh, how would you like to do that, Neil? It says a minimum pay scale of $40,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to break it down. Just give me a minute.
Okay, take your time.
Yeah, that would be good if you can, if I can kick you guys over there so that it doesn't seem like we're all yelling at one another to get over this. No, these four right here, please.
Which one are we doing?
Okay, are you putting this in chat, Neil?
We're all doing, sorry, for the folks that are in the room,
The first. Yes, I'm putting you into groups right now.
Okay.
Just
Bottom.
taking me a second here because it didn't hold the names that I put in earlier.
Never gonna happen.
One teacher.
Oh.
And before we do that, if somebody in the group is willing, please to kind of report out where your conversation went, or you as a whole group can, but we'd like to hear from each group.
Yes. The second one.
One's.
Sorry, guys.
Just ignore the first vignette.
It looks like Zoom has changed their process for breaking into groups since the last time I used it, so of course. God, this is just not my night.
Yeah, so. Just have those kind of. What? I mean, we wouldn't speak out in your own house saying, well, I guess we gotta.
Mark Pluck, thoughts on this one?
Would you?
Well, we can do it just as a whole group if you'd like. You want to do that?
I think Carrie's almost there.
Oh, okay.
This.
There we go. All right.
This is, yeah, I don't know that it's, yeah, my lord.
All right, I got it figured out. Thank God.
We knew you could do it.
I don't have as much confidence as you right now.
So guys, as we go through this, I might suggest taking a look at this list,
Yeah.
right? This is the checklist,
Yeah, it's just
Right.
sure you're right.
and then. take
Sorry
this
for the
down
delay, guys. I'm getting
apply that
everybody
to
put in the rooms
yeah.
now.
So we can certainly eliminate the first one.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna relate that to your tax paying.
Yeah, this year's, that thing is more than it affects. You just, right, as a constant. Everything affects everything.
It directly impact my.
Yeah, it's not, it's not really.
But it impacts different places, just
So
ways.
definitely impacts my
Some are not on anymore.
Figure out.
It's hard to put on the.
I'm here, Carrie.
But there, it's not, you're not listed being in the room.
Yeah, no, no.
You get.
Yeah. I mean, I think like.
Most issues impact library, one way or another.
Let me tell you what.
You must continuously have.
This one is very close there. But a lot of.
You know, more money needs to come.
Very direct. I can't see almost
Schools.
anything here on those guys. It's gonna affect them.
Schools.
Sure, I mean, I guess,
It changed since the last time I used it, and I don't know
yeah, and also it's in
Why?
education policy.
when. I wish they would tell
It's
us when
almost
they
like
make changes.
releasing the internet. I mean, even if it
See, it's
is,
not showing
even
Sandra
if
on
it's
here.
entirely outside the district, it affects the tax fund. Because the way the.
Carrie, I wonder if it's because it sees me as the domain person and I could just enter a room. What room should I go in?
You're in room number 2.
Funding.
Okay, let me try it.
Legacy school.
Hi.
We in the board didn't bring it up.
What about?
We knew we had
It's just
conflicts
not my
all over the place.
technology. I told him.
We just kicked the can down the road. I'm not sure I feel good about that, but the conflict never came up. We probably should have just, but anyway, this is.
And I think the other people are here, right? That
This
that
one.
are posted on here.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I certainly have, I could say responsibility during development process.
Oh, yeah, now,
Policy.
now it just shows up.
For a while.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why. That's not how it used to be.
Scanning your face.
So,
Here's what the article for. When you were.
You guys start.
Should we give the background on why resolution?
And I'll just tell them to close. I'll
And
close.
then people start thinking when they create the policy for themselves. What the other issues are. There's such an informational gap.
Yeah, I
right?
think schools all.
Yeah. I mean, you take this up in the Northeast. Can't get this over salary.
They're really pushing for that.
Oh, sure, and that's a big issue.
Yeah.
We actually have the opposite issue in our district that we're always trying to raise the bottom level.
And you get away with it, but.
Well, because we try and deal with these really massive things, we try and limit the laws.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
That's where you get complicated association.
So let's step back from that just a little bit, right? Think about this, right? So you've got perhaps a district which has a different opinion on this matter. But you're serving in VSBA and that building, and we passed a resolution, right? So there's a conflict there, right? Your local district is there. Think about this from your service on the VSBA board of directors. What do you think you should?
And my first comment was present to the board members how the VSBA resolution was created and why and what all the input was. So that at least you have that perspective, we give them what we begin the discussion.
by far the highest paid.
Which discussion are you talking about?
When you get to the issue of the salary differential, and what you want to do at a budget level.
And you're saying local.
Locally.
So when you say local.
Yeah, now let's
I think it's
let's
the
break down,
representative.
but now think about what your VSBA hat, right? Let's say, for example,
So,
Sue.
I have
Sue, I really need you to go testify in House Ed on this issue for VSBA. Can you do that for me?
Yes, because I bought into the resolution. And the reasons that was created. I'm serious.
I would say.
What they want is
Why not?
a raise.
Why not? I would say
So they're like, oh, it's only 70% raise, right? No, you're stepping.
I can't support this, and I'm not going to.
Step can be 20,000. So no, you just, and we handed out some numbers.
Intellectually bought into why the resolution was put in the.
If I support it, then I'll do what else. Yeah,
All right.
I support it.
But then you have to deal with the conflict at the local board when you go
And I
back.
stopped talking about
But-
it.
That doesn't mean you don't agree with the resolution.
That's a small C, that's disagreed.
They don't do the
Board
numbers.
members, not a conflict.
But you have.
That's a different thing.
I don't think they're gonna be.
No, I know.
mathematics. I think they don't punish the numbers.
Which is more than for.
It is.
Yes, and so they
So
just.
it might
pull
be,
one
it
person out.
affects yours,
Well,
also,
that
but
sounds
if you add
good.
up all the then your percent,
Our,
yours.
you, when our things gonna raise budget $5 million.
So-
Yours is gonna raise.
We're talking, I mean,
That's good.
the question really comes up is. The conflict comes not with the VSBA, but with.
Conversation.
Right,
I go the board.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I agree.
I mean, I think you could see it either way, right? I mean, one organization that you're a member of has one position. Another organization that you're a member of has a different position.
Yes.
I would disagree with that.
I don't know that I don't see this as a hierarchy.
Yeah.
If that's.
No, good, good. I'm glad you said this.
No, I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, I wasn't one board member.
Okay.
I was looking at.
You voluntarily, you don't encourage anything dealing with.
With negotiation.
If a local board, if your position,
Just.
the students support you, and
Even the ones that might.
Well, so, so maybe I would make the argument, I would back up for a second, say,
But.
don't,
He'll ask the
you
chair,
need
like,
to ask,
you
you support the VSBA position because you are a VSBA board member.
Well,
And at the delegate assembly, a resolution was passed. That now becomes
right.
your position as a VSBA board. member.
Right.
But it helps if you intellectually agree.
No, sure. That's a good point. That,
You're all in when that resolution passes. And you can't negative that word.
That's good, but you can't be taxed. She's saying, I will not speak.
What do you mean by that?
Afterwards.
I can say, I can't call a legislator and ask.
If they're negotiating too, and the NEA is allowed to talk statewide, every district to manipulate and strategize.
So in your mind, there is a hierarchy.
So,
You know.
so they could.
Your line is right.
I don't think you're gonna this guy was
Possibilities on all strategy.
So-
It was on the select board for years, and that was always tricky.
Select board, that's cool.
So if you,
I worry about, I get tired.
It was a.
well, so let's take this a step further, right? So what Ford just
Space,
said, right?
School board. that
When
I-
you joined the VSBA board, just like when you joined your, so when you joined your local board, you had to take an oath of office, right? When you joined the VSBA board, we cover
I.
the
can
duty of
get the
care,
tender for us in
the duty of obedience, the duty of loyalty, right?
2-year position.
Are those no longer applicable if your
And
local
known as a
district has a different?
I am off the council now, so that's. But
Can't violate.
it was easy, okay, but it would be, we don't, I don't think we vote on the budget.
So is there a scenario, so is there a scenario, so is there a scenario by which
Say, okay.
you
where
would
the
keep
schools
silent at the local?
Let me tell you what the school's doing.
No.
All right,
Because
come
why?
back to city council
I'll
table.
certainly advocate for the VSBA position at the local level. At the local board.
No, I'm saying like, is there a situation, right, reverse, so you said you would be silent at the VSBA level because your local district and your own personal opinion is different.
But, you know.
Is there a scenario by which, so what happens in your local district when, I don't know, or your 5-member board, right? When the vote was 4-1 and you were the dissenting then,
Deciding how many teachers.
do you then actively go out in the community and advocate for something different after the vote's already been taken?
No, it's chair.
Why?
It's chair.
They get.
Not regular, just consider yourself a regular board.
Okay. Again, I would not. That's what I was thinking. Either advocate for it or it is.
Your board's position and you're a member of the board, like, so let's say that it was the budget vote was 4-1.
Yes, but
You're against the budget and there you are at town meeting. And this year you're presenting a budget.
now in that case, I'm clearly representing.
They're just
Present.
saying it, and I'm telling them to say it.
And why is that different than when you look at it from the VSBA?
Because in that case, it's actually represented here. And maybe I'm being influenced by my, it's just the legal context too, yeah, sometimes you just conflict of acts.
Because same conflict can arise vice versa. Right? Well, I was a parent, no.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a good question, it's a good question.
and I think this, what I
I
mean,
give my own approach to finding myself in these kinds of. Two obligations that are contradictory.
Well, then get out.
They're not. They're needed.
First one.
But usually these are needed.
what happens if 2/3 of the VSBA took your position on a given issue? What would happen to the organization?
Picture of this dog.
Well, it would.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And he's done it twice now. And I.
Jim wants to know if
That's
that.
I was about to suggest that we bring everybody back, say, I'm looking at time, I can just hit the button, it'll bring everybody back into the. All right, gang, how we doing? Cause I should be about bringing everybody back together. Oh,
Yeah, we're.
holy moly.
They're done now.
What are we gonna report, guys? The actual solution, the only solution is not.
Yeah, representing.
But you taking it literally, the FTA to the
Okay.
And then you are
Also affected. Because your region votes you into the PNPA. Your region board member is not a.
Is everybody back?
I don't know that everybody is back, but they should be on their way.
Okay. And Neil, do
right.
we have time for the second one or just time for a readout?
I think we only have time for a read.
Okay.
But depending on how exciting this effort was, we can certainly bring back number 2 at the next meeting.
Okay, if people are interested, we can do that. And I thought it was interesting, one of the conversations we had earlier was that third vignette that we discussed the other day.
Carrie, that worked wonderfully. Thanks for your work on getting us into our groups.
Thank you, Carrie.
Carrie's
The room.
Carrie's doing so many things tonight that it's amazing that this is going off at all. She's getting food ready, she's trying to get the TVs working, she's putting people in the breakout rooms. She's in. So make sure you all appreciate Terry at some point. Terry, I'm gonna turn it over to you if you want to organize a readout.
Sure. Okay, why don't we start with the two groups that were in at VSBA headquarters, and just interested in how your discussion went and any aha moments that you want to share as well. Is there-
So who side wants to be the spokesperson?
I guess I.
Sure.
I mean, we kind of already covered this in a different set of scenario, but it's, we came up with the idea that you just have to be very clear about which hat you're wearing when you're discussing this. You can say the VSBA is set a minimum standard and the VSBA is talking for the state in general and all school boards, and I can respect that position. Putting on my local hat, this is gonna be very hard for our local taxpayers to burden, and maybe we can try and get the legislature to step this up for local things so that it helps us, but as long as you're very clear about which hat you're wearing at the time you're talking and not trashing the original resolution, I think you're okay to move forward.
Okay. And it sounds like somewhat similar to the discussion that took place in mine, but let's go to the second group and
Sure.
Who's gonna speak up?
Who's that?
Okay. I took notes for the group. In full disclosure, I am not a school board member. But a former one. But I'm a former one. Anyhow, our group just struggled to get to a resolution on this, honestly. We kind of started talking more broadly that almost everything that the VSBA considers directly impacts local school boards, so that was kind of our starting point. And then I think we were really quick to identify the tension between allegiance to our constituents, those who voted us onto our school board position, which then put us in a position to run for or be voted on to the VSBA board. And I don't think we really moved beyond that tension other than to acknowledge that that tension existed and potentially moved us into a place where we would just take no position on the legislation. But personally, I think what Mark's group came up with potentially works, because sometimes you pass these resolutions that are kind of more general, but then when you actually put pen to paper and you know, legislation is going to have kind of more details about it breathes life into a resolution, and certainly issues arise that make legislation harder to implement for some districts than others. And I think it's really reasonable then, like, that's when you have those good conversations about, well, this negatively impacts our school district because the delta is $16,000 and that's going to be hugely expensive. So like, what can the state do? Because you're not necessarily speaking out against the resolution. You're saying, like, I still agree with a statewide minimum pay scale. You're just saying, like, our district is going to need some help getting there. So I don't know.
okay.
I think our group probably could have gotten there, don't you think?
I think the
It sounds like there's some really rich discussion going on, which is the important piece, really. Okay, group number 3. I'm not sure who was in that, but
So I think we were group number 3.
okay.
So we had some great conversation. We came down with that our first responsibility and advocacy would be for our constituents. But then we also talked about that maybe there was a little hidden agenda in that question that you proposed to us to discuss. And that maybe that hidden agenda was that there was actually a statewide teachers contract.
Oh,
Such that it would then be this, we would all be in the same boat as we are now with the statewide health piece for teachers and staff, and that basically, you know, it's a negotiated piece and you kind of like have to just learn to deal with it and acknowledge that you don't really control what comes out of that negotiation, and then you then have to turn around and sell it to your voters. But we all know that we have to support our statewide legislation, and it's kind of hard to go against it. So our first hat goes to our constituency, and then we'd support whatever else from there. But we did also acknowledge that for some districts, if this was a statewide contract or moving to a statewide contract, this would be exceptionally difficult for many districts to implement. So,
okay. Group number 2.
I will speak up for that. it was just Bart and I with Sandy as a so-called silent observer. We took a slightly different direction because of me probably, but I believe there are actually two steps in this process. You know, we've got this resolution. How does my board feel about it? Is my board going to support it, or is my board against it? And that seems to me the first step is find out how the board's position. If the board agrees with the town and that we shouldn't even try, then I'm going to do my best to argue against it. And I'm going to talk about things like, even at $40,000, that's not really a livable wage. What kind of teachers are we able to hire at 24,000? Is our emphasis on the kids or is on the well-being of the town? So I would try all those arguments, and if those arguments fell on deaf ears, then I've got a problem, because and I either recuse myself or I resign. And I let the board know that. If the board agrees and we all decide that we were elected for a reason and that we're trying to follow our best interests, then once the board is united, then we campaign and try to win everybody over. Seems to me pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Did I leave anything out, Bart?
No, you did a great job, David. Thank you.
Okay, and we have one more group, and then I have some closing thoughts. And I know we're running a few minutes behind schedule. I apologize. The group that I happened to observe.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to do, or you want? Okay, we came to a conclusion very similar to what the first group, Mark's group, had, but with a little bit of David flavor to it as well. Honestly, that what hat you're wearing is extremely important. That when you're still discussing what the position is, because if the position of the VSBA was that there should be a statewide minimum whatever, then that's a very general sort of position. When you get down into the meat of it with legislation on the line, then everybody should be involved in providing the perspective of their districts into the discussion. Once the VSBA reaches a position, then that's the VSBA's position, though. So after that, if you're wearing your VSBA hat, you aren't talking against that position. But if you're wearing your school district hat, then maybe you are. It's trying to be extremely important to recognize what hat you're wearing and identify that to other people.
That was a big takeaway in that group, I believe, Jim, was that always be aware of which hat you're wearing and not to make derogatory comments. And I heard that from several of you. One thing I do want to, and this is a little bit off topic, but not really, but I heard from several of you about your constituencies. And I'm not sure what Vermont law is, but in Maine, and the law court in Maine has decided that your first obligation in Maine as a school board member is to the students in your district. It's not to the voters. And so that may be something that you want to think about and see how it's written in Vermont. It may be very different, so it may not matter, but identify the constituency is my point, I guess, in that. And the other thing was there was no hidden agenda about a statewide contract. The vignette came up because we do have a statewide minimum salary in Maine. And now since this was written, because this was written for our meeting that was supposed to be last month when I was sick, they've introduced legislation to increase that minimum. So that's where that came from. But it's a good thought. I always thought a statewide contract made a lot of sense, especially if you have small districts. But I think that what I'm getting back from all of you is that you're realizing that you need to stop and think about which hat you're wearing when, and think about what's the VSBA resolution. And I did ask a question in my group about, does it make a difference if it's the Board of Directors making a decision or if it's Delegate Assembly making a decision? And I believe Mark, Jim, Lisa, make sure that I'm being accurate, but I believe that they said it didn't make a difference where the decision came from. It's a VSBA position, and they have to stop and think about what their local board decision is and which hat they're going to wear when. Other comments?
Problem I have with the sort of that switching hats thing is it leads you to be advocating contradictory things.
Yeah, it can.
Laura, go ahead.
So I think one thing that came up there for us to just briefly was that as representatives in the VSBA board, we represent more than our local kids. We represent the kids of a large, a bigger pool of kids, and I call that actually a bigger pool of boards, right? So if my 15-member board is not happy with something, I still have I forget now how many more? 74 that might be in favor of that resolution. So and then the last thing that I would say is that I would say my board members that it's hard to take off your board hat. It's hard to take off your VSBA hat. It's hard to take out your local hat. So just changing hats doesn't always work, because even if you are, in my mind, even if you're going to the legislature with just your board hat, it's hard to not also have your VSBA hat, even if you're, I don't know, it's just, and it's hard to advocate for your kids as a board member. It doesn't matter,
Yep.
So especially then husband, right? Try to not have conflict, so there might be somebody else in your board that can do it. I'm just sharing that.
No, I think you're right on, Floor. I think that you need to embrace each hat that you wear. And but when you're making decisions about things that are in conflict, you've got to identify and announce if you're not going to be the priority hat for that moment, or that priority point of the hat, if you have a whatever you call those hats, is not VSBA.
Well, Terry, thank you very much for your assistance getting us through this. We really appreciate it. And
Well,
we see
thank
you one
you.
more time. This is not the end of our engagement with Terry. We see Terry one more time.
Right.
And for members, what I might do, just to finish up the conversation tonight, I will, so as you have entrusted me with leadership of this organization for the past several years, to which I am extremely grateful. When it comes to conflict of interest, I just wanted to highlight one of the points that Terry had on her list. It really works best for me, and I'm going to guess your board chairs back home, when people can self-identify conflict of interest.
Yeah.
In every instance where I've had where things get contentious, it's because either the chair or somebody else accused another board member of having a conflict of interest. And I just find that these things really go much better when each of us can sort of self-identify those things and then bring them forward. If I have to, as chair, I can go ahead and do the next step if somebody's not going to do that, but I would prefer not to have to be in that position. And so I just put that out there to board members, is that I think whether it's VSBA or your local board, these things work better if you can self-identify.
That well said, Neil.
Right, and with that, we're gonna pause here for some brief dinner at 2 Prospect. For those folks at home, please grab something and we will convene. Can I shorten this from a half an hour to
15 minutes.
Pauline is suggesting 15
You're not gonna be able to get your food and sit down in 15 minutes.
We're gonna go, so let's reconvene in 20 minutes, folks. 20 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm gonna shut down the Zoom, so you'll have to reconnect because my system's not working correctly. So I'm gonna shut it down. I'll bring it back up.
You don't. Just.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good little nosh, fight to eat. We are gonna get back into things and we're on item number 4, which is the legislative update. Which I believe will be sharing duties between Sue
And Sandra and Karen.
all right,
I'm starting out though.
okay, Sue,
Right.
go ahead.
All right. So we are past the crossover date at the legislature. Committees are now taking up bills from the opposite chamber, and they're also taking testimony on bills that they will take up next year. It's a very dynamic part of the legislative session. We could see significant changes made to some of the bills. The opposite chamber could refuse to take up a bill. And sometimes bills that we thought were dead come back to life when they get put into a miscellaneous ed bill or some other bill that is deemed to be germane. The one bill that I'm going to talk about before I hand it over to Sandra is H 4483. That is the bill regarding public funding of private schools. As you know, that was passed by the House, so it's in the Senate Education Committee. That committee has started to take a little bit of testimony on the bill. There was a head of school for the Compass School that testified today. And also legislative counsel was helping the committee understand some of the history that led up to the current situation that we're in. Legislative history, I should say, and state board rule history. So I'm not sure if anyone would like to go into the specifics of the bill. I can send you a link that is a very good summary of it. Under H 483, private schools can continue to accept publicly tuition students, but they have to comply with a set of accountability and oversight requirements in order to be able to do that. Right now,
Oversight of Department of Education.
it's mainly the state board. Yeah. State Board of Education.
So unless somebody complains that a private school not taking special ed kids or something, they won't know, or?
It's a complaint-based system. There's also a system of that private schools need to be approved every certain number of years by the state board. So every time they go through that process, they're going to have to
What kind of review that is?
well, it depends on if they're accredited or not. If they're accredited, it's much more of a summary review. Yeah. But under the statute, they're also going to have to attest to certain things annually. So if they don't attest to those, then that would be a red flag for the board. Yeah.
It's probably
And does this include religious schools? Yes. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to give you an update on childcare and early education and then universal school meals. So multiple committees have been discussing various provisions around childcare and pre-K, and the topics are being taken up all week in a couple different committees. We don't know yet the direction with any certainty of either chamber, but we are continuing to monitor this very closely. S56, which we reported on last month, which was the childcare bill that had some public pre-K for 4-year-old language in it and left the Senate with a pre-K study that focuses primarily now on childcare and the paid family leave. House Human Services has been taking that bill up this week, and they are discussing pre-K issues that extend well beyond a pre-K study. They've talked about several issues around this, some of which includes learning standards, universal pre-K, and wondering how universal it actually is, public pre-K for 4-year-olds, out-of-state providers, especially in the Northeast Kingdom, and pre-K ADM. And that particular topic, the pre-K ADM, is being taken up by House Ways and Means. So they're listening to testimony now and deliberating on that topic. I'll pause before I shift to universal school meals and ask if there are any questions there.
When you say pre-K, you mean 3 and 4-year-olds, right? Right now, it's 3 and 4-year-olds.
3, 4, and 5 who are not entered in kindergarten. Okay. And then universal school meals, I think we reported on H-165 last time as well. That is a law that would make universal breakfast and lunch permanent. So beyond the COVID funding that we're currently experiencing in this current year. The bill would make universal meals permanent and actually funded from the education fund. Off the top of the education fund right now is the language. It would expand the incentive grant for purchasing locally produced foods to include approved independent schools and some pre-K providers as well. And then it also would require school districts to maximize federal funding in order to be eligible for the school meal supplement. It's estimated to increase the homestead and non-homestead property taxes by 3 cents. And as a note, this body may be interested to know that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has proposed a rule change at the federal level that would expand access to community eligibility provisions, going from a threshold of 40% poverty to 25%. And that would have a significant and positive impact on Vermont, because it would mean more school districts would be able to draw down federal dollars and be eligible for that program. I wanted to note that the public comment period for that potential rule change was just extended to May 10th. So there's still time if you're interested in providing public feedback there. And then the Senate Education Committee, it looks like, will potentially mark up and vote on this bill on Friday this week. So any questions on universal school meals?
Jim?
Yeah, in sort of a related one, we have been having an issue with, of course, with pupil weighting factors. There's supposed to be a new form coming out, universal income form, but on the old free and reduced lunch forms, we've been trying to essentially bribe people to fill out those forms, but we're getting so few forms back that a couple of our schools have fallen below that 40%. And we know they're not actually below that. We just can't get enough forms. So I think that's a real sort of significant issue. And I'm guessing that a lot of other districts have that issue as well. And just hoping we can kind of put pressure on to ensure that, the best outcome, it's tough to, we need to ensure that whatever forms we can get, that we can get forms back and that those forms qualify for the federal programs. So I'm just, we're concerned as a district about that, and just hoping there's some good news on that front.
Earlier in the session, Rosie Kruger from the AOE testified quite a bit on that, and they were exploring a few different eligibility criteria or standards that they might be able to implement, but I haven't heard updates more recently. I would just ask Kara, have you heard anything more recently?
Haven't. In fact, if I've heard anything, it's been counter to what Jim just said, and that it's not impacting funding. So, no, I'm not. Well, just the collection of the household income forms has not, as we've shifted to universal meals, it hasn't negatively impacted the collection of those forms.
We've certainly seen them.
We just, as a district, we started holding, raffles for the people who come back with a form. They get a chance on winning an iPad and stuff like that. And we're still, the percentage, we know that the poverty levels aren't changing dramatically, but the number of forms we have back has changed dramatically.
Yeah, they do.
That's
They
important.
just have a legislative fix for that.
I mean, in addition, don't those forms also help with your Title I funding?
They do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know the first time in years, we were one, I think there was 2 or 3 schools in the state that got a significant cut in our Title I funding. It's the first time in 15 years. We had to RIF for staff over the weekend before the RIF notice because we didn't know where the funds were gonna come from, because our grant was cut almost in half.
Yeah, we're getting the numbers eventually, but it's pretty water.
Yeah, so let me go to, Mark's got his hand up online. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been hearing from districts all over the state that they're having significant problems, just like Jim said, with getting the forms returned. Districts that have, let's say lower income districts that don't have funds to help hire people or influence people to get the forms returned are having an even harder time. This was the argument that we made last year for getting the new income form started for, I think, FY24. So it's definitely a significant problem out there.
Sandra, is that all on your?
Yes, that concludes my section. I'm ready to pass it over to Kara.
Okay, Karen, you're up.
Now we're on to school construction and PCB testing. H486 and S124 were the companion bills that established a school construction task force. During the process on the House side, a pause to the PCB testing program was added to H486. H486 is now on the Senate side and in Senate Education. S124 did not make it out of the Senate and was instead put into the big budget bill. So an appropriation for this task force was just put into the budget bill. And now Senate Education is just starting to take up H486. So that act has 2 sections. It creates the School Construction Aid Task Force to examine, evaluate, and report on issues relating to school construction aid, obviously with the goal of standing up a statewide school construction aid program. H486 also pauses the PCB testing program and then does all sorts of things to revert the money that was set aside for that back into the fund for grants, money to Burlington for the cost of removal and which now includes demolition. And what also came out of all of this is that these grants will now cover 100% of the cost of remediation and removal costs, as well as relocation costs. Initially, it was anticipated that schools would be reimbursed 80% and then would have to come up with 20%. So that all sits now in Senate Education. Senate leadership and the administration have been really clear that they do not support a pause to the PCB testing program. Today, Commissioner Levine testified in House Education about his, their stance on the PCB testing program. So we'll see how this all plays out during the rest of the session. There is not agreement on that piece of that bill.
Before you move on, because I see Dan's got his hand up. So Dan, you had a question on this one?
It's more a comment. While this meeting was in progress, I received the email that our school had just been tested and tested positive for PCBs. Also, the Newfink's, one of the schools in our supervisory union is already having to relocate kids. So I don't know. I just want everybody to be aware that this is not something that's in the distant horizon. This is, we won't know until we find out our numbers, but what are we going to have to do tomorrow or next week with the kids in our school? So keep an eye on it, and thanks for the update.
Any questions around the table? No. All right.
Okay, I'll switch gears to school safety. The school safety bill that is under consideration is S138. The bill proposes to require public and approved independent schools to, well, actually, do you want me to go through the specifics of the bill? Some of this was in the legislative report, but before I drill down, helpful?
Yeah, why don't you?
Great, okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure before I dove in, okay. So the bill proposes to require one, public and approved independent schools to adopt a policy mandating biannual options-based response drills. Two, to require public schools and approved independent schools to adopt all hazards emergency operation plans. Three, to require schools to adopt an access control and visitor management policy. And then four, this is the area where there has been a lot of discussion and testimony. It would require schools, well, initially it required schools to establish behavioral threat assessment teams. There was a lot of testimony from various organizations working with students who are on IEPs and 504 plans with concerns about labeling these students as threats in the school. So the Senate Education actually changed that requirement to one that just says, asks schools to submit certain data to the AOE if they have these threat assessment teams in place.
There's no requirement to have one.
So now as the bill stands, as the bill that came out of the Senate and is now under consideration in the House does not have a requirement for this behavior threat assessment teams. I think the goal coming out of the Senate was just for the AOE to collect data to kind of see what, just to see if these threat assessment teams are effective and if they're disproportionately impacting marginalized students on 504 plans and IEP plans. So most of this bill, actually the first three requirements that I laid out for you are practices that school districts are generally abiding by. So like I said, the real focus of the testimony has been on those behavioral threat assessment teams. And that bill is under consideration in House Education. They're continuing to take testimony and I'll continue to monitor it. We will continue to monitor it. The next two bills.
You jump to
Oh,
Jim's
sorry.
got his hand. No, I know you can't see, so I'm just gonna jump
Yeah,
in.
sorry.
Jim got his hand up, so Jim, go ahead.
No, I was just trying to understand that, if they aren't going to be doing the threat assessments, but there's still a reporting requirement. I'm trying to tie those things together. They're going to still get data on it. How can they get the data on it if they aren't doing the assessments?
Some schools are doing these, do have these behavioral threat assessment teams in place. And if you do have these teams, then you have to submit certain data, which I don't think is articulated in the bill, to the Agency of Education. It probably is articulated in the bill. I just don't have it on hand. But it's only if your school district is utilizing these teams.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
There's a ton of feedback from parents about alarming the kids. And so there's gonna be a lot of information put out as to why we do this, how we do it. As opposed to just becoming a law and, yeah.
Maybe there
tricky.
need to be a lot of information.
There needs to be a lot of information provided. Yeah,
What we need to do the threat assessment or what we need to.
the whole concept and,
Goodbye.
the drill, if you get into the drills and everything, I mean, the parents are going crazy on this. In our districts.
Really?
Oh, they're so concerned and they're really concerned that we're gonna upset the kids because we don't do it well or something.
Well, the option-based drills that's another name for active shooter drills. So that's what it is getting parents alarmed, I think.
They don't have the information.
Right.
It's like Alice or.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Interesting. Well, this all came from the Agency of Education. They have been advocating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand.
Yeah. Okay. All right, moving on to, there are two bills relating to student health. One is H 481, that's a suicide prevention bill. It provides that on or before January 15th of 2024, the Director of Suicide Prevention, in collaboration with the Agency of Education and stakeholders, will develop and submit a model protocol for all schools regarding suicide prevention, education, and post-pension services to the House Committee on Healthcare and the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare. And currently the bill is in Senate Health and Welfare. Any questions on that bill?
Not seeing it.
Okay, so the next bill is S18. That's a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco products and e-liquids to any person under 21 years of age, and prohibits the use of tobacco products, e-liquids, tobacco substitutes, et cetera, on school grounds. The bill is currently in House Human Services, who is very busy with S56 right now, child care bill. So we'll just continue to monitor that.
Does that include staff, does anyone on school grounds with tobacco use?
Yeah, anyone, and that's why last year the bill, I think one of the reasons why the bill didn't make it through last year.
The NEA is probably weighing in.
Any other questions?
Any? Am I missing
Jim has his
anybody?
hand up.
Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, this is more of a general question with all the legislative activity that seems to always be going on, in spite of the fact that the VSBA several different years have, asked the legislature, please give us a little bit of a break. One thing I'm finding in local districts here and hearing from administrators is they really are starting to go insane with the amount of obligations they have for reporting, all the different requirements. It's really starting to take a toll on a lot of administrators, superintendents, and all out there, I think. And I know that it hasn't done a whole lot of good when we've made suggestions in the past that they have to pay attention to the load they're putting on our people. But I'm really just sort of curious. I'm hearing that pretty loud and clear in my neck of the woods, and I don't know whether others are or others should be, kind of reaching out and, getting a feel from their superintendents and principals and all as to whether they, whether they still think it's manageable, everything they're asked to do.
It's not. We're just seeing staffing increases at the SU level to handle it. Yeah. Well, and also it just burning staff out.
Oh, yeah.
They just can't keep up.
Would this be something that a resolution would be relevant? Relevant to have a resolution, having the legislature address that, like, get rid of something,
So we've had resolutions in the past that deal with this, I think maybe not directly head on, but certainly we've got the unfunded mandates.
I remember them.
Yeah, honestly, every year, we have delivered the message to the legislature every year that please take it easy, we don't need any more, multiple or big initiatives. So it's not like we haven't been relaying the message, it just doesn't seem to resonate most years.
But I think maybe it could make some sense for us to just try to give them some more concrete examples, like in my district, again, it's the HHB process has become, sort of burdensome. We hired somebody specifically to handle the investigations on HHB, but now we're actually having to contemplate getting an assistant for that person because the principals are finding it hard to be principals. That's the sort of process that can take, a huge amounts of time. So we're having to add administrative people just to handle, it's not as if we have massive behavior problems, but, just to handle the cases you have because the process is long and arduous.
Yeah, Jim, I don't certainly hear what you're saying. I don't think that we've got much of an ability to affect things this session, but your points I think are well made, and we might be able to put some stuff together in the off season, maybe to have ready to bring forward for the beginning of the next session on this.
this is the time to talk about it, certainly wouldn't be for this session, but if they think that what Jim said was true, in order to get anything changed, you would have to do all the work. So that the legislature would know, bring up extremely, it would be, or maybe a study committee or something that would review very specifically, what are the areas where there is too much work? What are some suggestions for reducing the amount of work? What things can be, you know, I mean, because that's a lot of work. If the legislature even wanted to do it, it would be a huge job to go, because you gotta go back and look at everything you've been asking for the last umpteen years. And you forget all about those things that you ask when you're adding something new. So it would really need a complete evaluation by probably a consultant to say, here's what you should do. You know?
Problem is, each one's well intentioned.
They are, but
there when it was put into place.
so it would have to be a strategy of showing people what, you know, you can't do all of them. Which ones do you want them to do? Which is more important? This
Everything in
one
the
now.
middle world.
Exactly.
So I think, you know, we can,
It's not time to talk about it now, but
yeah, we can certainly add it on for a future agenda item. And like I said, maybe in the off season when we're not so bogged down with keeping track of what's going on currently. Maybe we can develop a little bit better of a plan than we've had in the past to at least address this or maybe get the word out in the legislature on this. So.
I don't think the AOE is keeping up either.
Well, and I was just going to add that,
yeah, thanks. I don't think they ever have.
Yeah, we've known that for a few years. Right.
Well, all jokes aside about AOE and keeping up with the work, Jeff DeCarolis did testify in front of House Education last week and listed all the work that needs to be done per laws that have been passed over the past several years. And the message was actually very well received in House Education, and then informed future discussions about bills that would require additional work. So
Who provided that input?
just to Carolus.
Okay, thanks.
And it was her testimony last week. Once I'm done going through this, would you be interested in just having me, I don't know, I could get on the Zoom maybe and post a link to her testimony?
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Okay, all right, I'll do that when I'm done going through these. I'll zip through these next few bills. So there are two labor bills that we're keeping an eye on. One is S-102, and that impacts the collective bargaining process. So we're keeping an eye on that. S-103, sorry, is a law that amends the standard for harassment. It right now exempts school districts, but Senate Education has taken testimony from organizations who are strongly encouraging the committee to amend the underlying student harassment statute. And on Tuesday, Bora Yang testified again in front of the committee. She's the executive director of the Vermont Human Rights Commission, and she recommended that the committee either send their amendment to S-103 to include schools or amend H-483. So we are keeping a very close eye on that as well, because we're not really sure if or where that will show up. Any questions?
Can I just ask, instead of you sending that link in the chat, could you email it to us? Because not
Yeah.
everybody's on the.
Oh, yeah.
You send it to me.
I'll send it to you. Okay, perfect. That's what we'll do. Okay.
I was just thinking that not everybody on this.
Yes.
We'll get it out.
Right. Okay, good, good. Okay, and then there are just a few other issues. How the House Education Committee has taken testimony on H-409, which is an act relating to keeping Vermont students safe by restricting the use of restraints and seclusion in schools. They are going to wait until next session to take this bill up, but they are taking pretty extensive testimony in this area right now. I listened to a lot of interesting testimony today. So that's where they're at with that bill. The Senate has signaled that CTE language, discrimination, although now I don't think it'll show up in the miscellaneous education bill, but it could, a driver's education pilot program and possibly Senator Gulick's bill, S-132, which I think Sue included in your packet. So I won't dive too much into that, but that relates to the number of signatures that you need to get when you are submitting a petition for a candidate for office of a unified union school district. And then last but not least, mascots. In light of the recent complaint filed and recent testimony in Senate Education, Chair Campion asked Mia Schultz, Judy Dow, and the AOE to meet to discuss possible changes to the complaint process that was laid out in the law that was passed last session.
Perfect. That's a lot.
It is.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any questions for Kara on any of those remaining items? And Sue, I just want to check, I think we did get a board position on S-132.
Yeah. Yes, because it's likely they're gonna want to try to put that into the miscellaneous ed bill, so you could do that, that would be great.
Okay. So let me just turn the focus then to S-132 was included in your packet. I believe that this is language that most, at least those board members that were affected are in favor of, but Mark, you got your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, full disclosure, this was an issue that I brought to Martine that my board discovered when we switched from a proportional model to a modified at-large model. And basically it takes us back to where we were prior to the rewrite last year, which was either in statute or at least in practice, 1% or 30 signatures, whichever was less, for all districts.
Thanks, Mark. While you're there, Mark, in order to get us moving along here, do you want to make a motion that VSBA board support this bill?
Yes, I will. I'll modify that slightly, that we support the bill and the addition of the, someone maybe can help me with the language, but it was brought up in committee that that there would still be some districts that were not union districts that would still be subject to the 60 number. So I tell you what, my motion is that we are in favor of this this bill and across the board 1% or 30, whichever is less, for all school board candidate positions.
So basically, this is a reduction in the number of candidates that need, I mean, the number of petition signers.
Correct.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So Mark with the motion, Jim with the second. Is there any further discussion on this? 67 votes.
Jim Salzgiver was the second.
Salzgiver with the second.
VSBA districts are by White House. Oh,
I don't know how many, but there's many unified union districts. I mean, they were all the ones that were created through Act 46.
I forgot the definition now. Yeah, okay.
Can I goes to a consolidated school district? Supervisory union is not a unified school district.
A unified union school district is one that serves grades K through 12.
Oh, okay.
They have to serve grades. That's the definition.
Can I confirm the language?
What's that?
Can I confirm the language?
Yep.
Because he changed it in the middle, so I don't know if it makes sense. VSBA board supports the bill across the board of 1% or max of 30. That's all he said. So I don't know that makes sense to me.
But
I'm going to say that VSBA supports the bill with the addition of.
well, the language is signed
So-
by at least 3 or 1%, whichever is less.
Right, I don't think I changed
So,
that.
But that's.
So how about
yeah,
what I tried to say, and Carrie, sorry about changing it up on you in the middle there. VSBA approves the language of the bill and an across the board 1% or 30 signatures, whichever is less, for all school board candidates.
Oh, not just the unified school district.
Right.
Correct.
The second part,
Actually,
just.
I'll still second that.
Please, wants to amend,
So,
like to amend or something, so it's clear that it's an amendment.
okay,
so hang on just 1 second. So, do me a favor, Mark. Can we say this one more time?
I think his concern is that the law that we're reading is not what was in the
Right.
committee today. They're already changing it,
So-
so we don't want to lock ourselves into this.
oh, good point.
So we
Okay.
agree with this bill, but we'd also like it for any school board candidate anywhere in any district should have 30 or 1%.
But that's what I was trying to find, that the petition is signed by at least 30 voters residing in the Unified Union School District, or 1% of the legal voters in the district, whichever is less.
Right, to take out unified unit in school district now.
Yeah, so that's what I was
District.
asking.
Supports the
But I-
bill.
All just any.
For all
We can
districts.
function.
So wouldn't it be easier to just say supports the bill to be carried out for all districts?
But what happens with a district that doesn't have to get signatures? Would we be forced?
Doesn't affect you then.
Because we actually, no, we don't know who's running until that moment when your vote, you do it right from the floor.
Oh, for.
Right, this wouldn't affect floor nominations.
You're gonna get a petition.
Nope.
Yeah, you're not getting the petition,
Nope,
so you're.
but you're not on the ballot.
So
Nope.
you're fine.
Just getting on the back.
Yeah.
Okay, so, hang on, gang. So a couple of things that I'm learning tonight. Hybrid meetings are a little bit tougher. I really like the fact that when we all get together in person, there's a little bit more of a free flow of conversation. It makes my job a little bit tougher, though. When we get into these things going back and forth, it's hard to stop the momentum. So I'm just gonna ask maybe for the remainder of the meeting, if folks in the room, if you have something to say, just raise your hand so I can just manage the situation a little bit better. So I believe that what we've got right now is a motion that included a second. Carrie, did you get the language that Mark used the second time around?
What I have is VSBA board, the VSBA board supports the bill for all school board members.
I would just say
So-
explicitly.
You're gonna go like this, you're gonna go like this, and then I'm gonna say, Michael, go ahead.
Do that.
Okay, good. Now go ahead.
All right, good.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
I feel appropriately chastised. I would say that we just support a threshold of 30 signatures or 1%, whichever is less, period, for all school board positions, and not even reference the bill. Just, and we have whatever context
Would
arises.
that address Tara's
No, because
situation?
I guess I would be excluded from it because we're voting from the floor. Like, we don't have to do a petition. We don't have to,
Yeah.
we just literally. He asked me a question.
No,
so-
no, I know.
No, these guys are. Well, good, yeah, yeah. Go to Colleen, no,
Guys.
no, Colleen.
It seems to me that, I don't really know your local community, but it seems to me that's a different question. And so the question is, if you're gonna be formally put on a ballot, to get your name on the ballot, that's gonna get published and posted, then it would be the 30 or 1. If someone is voted from the floor, it's typically filling in an empty position.
There's no
There's no petition.
Barbara,
For those where there is a ballot. In advance or something, for those where there is a ballot. All school board positions which require, previous, what's the word, a ballot in advance.
petition ballot.
Use of
Petition.
Australian.
Gaston,
Yeah, Australian.
Yeah, so Barbara, and
we lost you, Gaston, you went mute. on
if
us.
you look on the, can you hear me
Okay.
now?
I think your internet just was a little wonky there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you look at section 2, It's let me see, paragraph 730, Unified Union School Board Members, Nominations and Elections Bond. Note A, if by Australian ballot, the provisions of this subsection A shall apply by Australian ballot. And so if you go from the floor, you're not Australian ballot and it doesn't apply. I think, doesn't that statement sort of, right? Answer that
Does help
question?
clarify.
Over?
No, that does help clarify. Thank you for pointing that out. Mark, go ahead.
I was going to say you're not getting a petition together if you're nominating from the floor, so it doesn't affect you at all.
Okay. All right, so now I've got a little side conversation going on in the meeting chat where Jim Salzgiver has been listening patiently, taking it all in, and has crafted yet another motion. Jim, you want to go ahead and read that for the folks that are in the room?
It was just a suggestion to try to make it clear. I think the VSBA supports S-132 and a change to a maximum requirement of 1% or 30 signatures for any school board candidates where petitions are required.
But isn't there already a motion on the floor?
Thumbs up.
Jim, Mark, would you care to withdraw your motion?
Yeah, but on this one, we just have to say 1% or 30, whichever is less.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so Mark's going to withdraw his previous motion. Jim Salzgiver, I heard, actually added those additional words when he gave his motion. I don't know if y'all heard that.
I did.
He said whichever is last. Dan MacArthur has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Can folks just raise your hands and keep them up so we can get a count? Unanimous in the room. I see unanimous online as well too. Thank you, board members. I think that at some point, I'm going to have a separate training session on how to craft the perfect motion. Because this always gives us a hard time, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the topic. All right. Dan MacArthur, you still got your hand up from voting or you got something to say?
I got nothing to say, sorry.
That's all right. Moving on then, I want to turn to Jim Salzgiver and the third quarter financial report.
Okay. Carrie, do you want to put it up or do we, where people have it in their packages? People don't usually want to hear a lot about the finances, especially when they're good. Basically, we are in good shape right now. We're 3/4 the way through the year. And at this point, we're showing an expectation of having we budgeted for a 0 net income. We're looking at probably having a positive. We'd have a positive to date, but at this point we have almost all our revenues in, but haven't paid all our expenses. So we're going to have about, on a net basis for the rest of the year, expecting about 40,000 more in expenses without a lot more revenue. So we're where we are is in a good place. We've and as an FYI, the finance committee has just met with Sue and Carrie and came to an agreement on a budget to present to you guys soon. So you're going to be seeing that. Where we are, the reason we're ahead of budget this year, there are two primary. On the cover page, you see a number of items that are a bit different than budget, but really the big reason for us being well ahead of budget at this point is one, the collective bargaining supports, which is always very difficult to project what that's going to be. We haven't spent a whole lot, but we're expecting to spend in the final quarter of the year. We'll still be well below budget for the year, but we're expecting to spend a lot more of that in the final quarter. The other item that is below budget for the year in a way to make a difference on the bottom line is all of our changes in personnel during the year have led us to, it's really, it's our salaries plus our benefits and our payroll taxes and all that. We're going to be under budget for the year. But on that, just want to, flag to everybody that, we have a vote coming up a little bit later in the meeting, where the plan is to increase the headcount at the VSBA office. That's going to have a significant impact next year. So I want everybody to just be aware that we had a very funky year because we had people coming in, people coming out. And the net result is a little bit below budget, but next year is going to be significantly higher than last year's budget because we're talking about an additional person. So just want to flag that for everyone. And that I could probably leave it there unless there are any questions.
Any board members with any questions for the finance committee? Dan McCarthy, go ahead.
Yeah, very simple one, Jim. I noticed that an item has a footnote attached to it. Looks like a number 2. It's just for board development. Looks like it's we're taking in over budget, not by a huge amount, but what is that? Where does that money come and go? What is board development? And if number 2 is in fact a footnote, where is that footnote?
Well, the footnotes are, there's a separate presentation that has a lot of footnotes, so it might be from there. But board development is really our board training that Phil had been doing so much of. We ended up well above budget because there was a heck of a lot of demand for board development this year because boards kind of recognized they needed some help. We're actually, next year's budget's going to show a little bit of a dip because we're, we have a bit of a hiatus here with the changing of the guard and with Phil leaving. But that, I guess we kind of expect, I think all of us should be happy that boards are looking for help and that, honestly, we've got with our newest person coming on board, it's another person with real skills in that area that can help out boards. So I think that's a profit generator for the VSBA, but it's also something that meets the goals of the VSBA very well. So that's what that is.
Thanks, Jim. That's much
Can I
appreciated.
say-
Thank you.
Those footnote numbers revert back to the treasurer's report. The numbers on the treasurer's report, that's what the footnotes refer to.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Carrie, keep me honest, always.
Gaston, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. Hey, Jim, thanks a lot for doing this. For me, I really appreciated the footnotes, right up front where you just, very quickly bulletized comments as to what all of this means. So I really like the way you're presenting this over.
Okay, well, Carrie gets a boatload of the kudos for that. She
Thank
does a
you,
good
Carrie.
job.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the finance committee? Or our treasurer? All right, seeing none, we're gonna move on then to VSBA staffing update and approval. Sue, I believe I turn it over to you.
Yes, I included a memo in the board packet. Asking the board to consider the option of transitioning VSBA's seasonal 5th employee, who we employ during the legislative session as our legislative analyst, into a full-time VSBA staff member. There is a proposed job description for the full-time position in the packet. Currently, as I said, we employ the legislative analyst during the months of January through May, and also beyond May if the legislature goes longer than that. The position is funded by the Education Legislative Coalition members, which is VSA, VPA, VSBIT, VICLA, VCSEA, and VASBO. And then VSBA provides in-kind contribution. So that's how the seasonal position is funded. This transition to a full-time year-round employee would eliminate the need to hire someone for that seasonal position during the legislative session. And the Education Legislative Coalition would continue to partially fund the full-time position. Additionally, VSBA has agreed to add $30,000 to our service agreement to help fund the full-time position as well. VSBA's fiscal year runs July 1 through June 30th. I'm requesting that you approve adding the position in the current fiscal year starting on May 1. The estimated cost during FY23 is $14,755. That includes salary, taxes, and benefits. We do have sufficient funds in the FY23 budget to cover the cost. The addition of the position on May 1 is going to help us fill the staffing gap created by Phil Gore's departure on March 17th, because his replacement is not arriving until May 15th on a part-time basis and June 19th on a full-time basis. So I included a proposed motion in case anyone wants to make the motion to get the conversation going. Thank you.
Wow, I saw a whole bunch of hands go up. I'm gonna go with Colleen first.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the addition of a new full-time VSBA staff position effective May 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2023, with final approval of the position dependent upon VSBA board approving a fiscal year 24 budget that includes the position.
Thank you. I have a second by Tara. We're in the discussion phase of the motion. Now, see how quickly that motion went there? We're in the discussion phase now. Any discussion? Mark, go ahead.
Is this going to require a hiring committee, or are you able to just say, well, this is an expansion of an existing position and therefore we can just move one person into the next?
It will not require a hiring committee.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're happy about because you were on the last one.
Any other questions, comments, debate on the motion? All right, seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it up. Unanimous in the room.
Thank you.
And unanimous online. Thank you, board.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. And I would add that you'll be seeing the fiscal year 24 budget proposed by the finance committee next in your May meeting. And that does, the one that they're approved does include the position. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna move on then to report from the awards committee. And as I look around, I realize that I've only got 2 members of the entire awards committee with us this evening. That's Mark Schauber and Carrie Lamb. I don't know if either Mark or Carrie would be willing to speak to that meeting.
Mark?
So, I was say Carrie may be in a better position to give more details than I, but from memory, I'm gonna go.
I'm glad to if you want to.
I was gonna go backwards and start with the what's the name of the
Stafford Bell? The Stafford Bell
yeah,
Award?
the Stafford Bell Award, which has not been given out in quite a while. Martine suggested in the committee that we give it to Don Collins, and I think there was complete support for that, given his years of service as a superintendent, a school board member, chair, member of the VSBA. I'm going to jump ahead, Neil. I don't know whether it's appropriate or not, and make a motion that.
Before you do that, Mark, I just wanted to step in because we know one of the requirements for that Stafford Bell Award is that they are not a sitting school board member, and Don still is.
I thought he wasn't.
Check it right now.
We are checking here locally, but we believe that he may still be a seated.
They have
Or-
updated me since town meeting day and they did not take him off as a school board member.
So-
They did make a couple of changes, but.
So I think, Mark, to be clear, I think we want to just do a little bit of homework before maybe we plow ahead with that motion. And even if we can't get an affirmative answer this evening, I don't think it matters if we even defer this to the May meeting. I think we've got time. And so I think in the interest of making sure that we get this correct, it might be best that we confirm everything.
Mark, do you want me to talk about the other award?
But
Please,
Harry, 1 second, yeah, but so yeah, I'm gonna have you do that. Let me just go. Dan MacArthur, did you have a question about this particular topic?
I just want to 100% support Don Collins for this when the time comes. When I was a young school board member, he was my superintendent here as a much younger man as well. So, and he's been an absolute stalwart. So I can't think of a better person to get the award.
All right.
We all
Thank you,
agree.
Dan.
Organized.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Mark that we withhold the motion for this evening because according to what we can find, he is actually still on the board. So rather than make things complicated, let's just we're gonna hit the pause button on this one for now and we'll revisit it in May if that's okay, or yeah, May.
The awards
Um,
committee could discuss, they haven't discussed the criteria for the Stafford Bell yet. We were going to do it and we ran out of time. So that might be part of the discussion for the,
Okay, I think, yeah, so I think with all of those points of information, I think it just makes sense to, pause for a moment, give us some more time to look into this, maybe have the committee meet again and review the Stafford Bell stuff. With that, okay, if you could
Yeah.
cover with the other stuff you guys talked about.
right, the other discussion that took up the entire meeting was our current board award that we give the excellence, Board of Excellence Award. Most of the committee felt very strongly that that award isn't working as it should be. And they highly suggested that we consider changing it to a board chair award instead of to a board. They think that it is very subjective as to who gets the most recommendations doesn't mean they're the best board and relevancy in that way. And instead they would like to change to be the excellence or exceptional board chair award.
Okay. Do board members have any questions on that? I think what I'd like to do is because we've got a recommendation to possibly change the award and the character of the award, that maybe we bring that back in May for a full board discussion and decision. But if board members at this stage have questions about that recommendation or other thoughts, we can entertain those now, Colleen.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the thoughts behind singling out an individual on a board when what we're always trying to promote is boards operating as a unit. And that seems contradictory in some ways, so I'm just wondering what's the thinking behind that with the committee. I mean, and I understand some people were unsettled with past boards receiving, but
Yeah, I just reporting on it, mind you, I think that they felt that it's very subjective. And where, for example, when you're going for a job interview and you have references, you're never gonna have bad references. Whereas a board, part of the process for this is that a board would get references from their superintendent, which is obviously gonna give a good reference. And they just felt like it wasn't subjective enough. Objective, I'm sorry, objective, no, I keep saying that wrong. In the process and how they're selected and where one board or a board in some eyes may be the perfect board because let's say they're the perfect board because they stood up to the union in negotiations, and just as many people think that they're a terrible board because they stood up to the union negotiations. So I think that was part of the problem, at least what they were voicing.
Let me go. Mark's got his hand up. So Mark, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as part of the criteria for the excellence in board chair, whatever it was that we called it, was going to have to be unanimous support from that chair's board members. So I think we felt that, and in addition to that, the reward for winning that is training for the board or something along those lines that would be shared with the whole board, not going to an individual person. So I think we felt that as a whole, we were going to get candidates for this award that were really going to be ones that had shown excellence in their jobs as board chair, which brings along with it more often than not, I believe, excellent boards.
Michael?
Just one comment on the unanimous support they get. That really eliminates, or probably eliminates, chairs who probably have the hardest job, which is ones with a divided board. And maybe need the most skill. And so that's just something to consider.
Colleen?
Yeah, I was just gonna reflect that a really good board chair typically has a really good board because they've learned how to distribute leadership along, the board for the functions of the board. And so I guess I'm still in favor of criteria that elevates the entire board rather than just the board chair. To me, they're fist and gloves sometimes.
Mark, is your hand up from before, or is it a new hand?
Oh, the new hand. I was just gonna say, in regards to what Michael mentioned, we talked about that exact situation where one person could hold up a nomination, and I think our belief was that a truly gifted, exceptional chair will be able to bring those along that don't agree. So that was what, as a committee, we believed in.
Okay. Mark, did that committee have a chair?
I'm sorry, say it again.
The awards committee have a chair?
I don't think so.
We did not.
No.
Okay.
I think Phil was kind of facilitating it.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is, can I request that committee maybe convene one more time between now and the next VSBA board meeting for two things. One, to review the criteria for Stafford Bell, and then take a look at the potential candidates there, since it seems like, at least from what we were able to find tonight, that Don would not be eligible for that award. So to send that one back to the committee to see if there's another person that they think might be worthwhile. While I'm on that topic, board members, if you know of somebody you think that would be good for this, please send that to Sue and I, and we'll make sure that the committee gets that information. Secondly, Mark, I think what I was hearing tonight from some board members is spending a little bit more time thinking about if we want to entertain a change in the award for the board award, not the Stafford Bell, but the other board one. I wonder if we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about perhaps what we need is a change in the criteria that a board would be evaluated on in order to receive that award, in addition to maybe then changing the award so that it honors a board chair. So that we make sure that we've done due diligence in capturing some of the concerns that I'm hearing from board members this evening, and then coming back with a proposal for the May meeting.
So if I could say two things, Neil. That's a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was sort of raising my hand. One, we spent a good hour of this meeting going over the existing award and talking about criteria and other things. I don't think we could find a way, but we definitely work on that again. I would request, though, that since we have lost one of our very, very valuable members in Amy, that you consider appointing somebody else to the committee as well.
Yeah. why don't I do this? So I am more than welcome to attend the next meeting as well too, but if there is another board member that would also like to participate, please reach out, let me know. And then I will make sure that working with, Sue, Carrie, and Mark and others that, when we reconvene the committee again, we'll get all the appropriate folks involved. Okay. That makes sense to everyone. All right, good. We are moving on then to the VSBA strategic plan monitoring report. I'll turn it over to Sue.
I just have a few things to note on here, and I hope everyone will be able to spend time to look at this report because it's always really important to monitor what we're doing in order to achieve our vision and mission. Harry, I think, wanted to provide the board with some information about your regional contact shared, it says contract, but it should say contact shared spreadsheet that they've been updated. The new board member information is being updated weekly. And she's put a template email in there for you to use as a starting point to email the new board members in your region. So go ahead, Carrie. She's got that up on the screen.
Great. I shared it up on the screen for those of you online and those of you in the room. This is what, so each of you should have gotten an invitation to your shared spreadsheet. Please bookmark that sheet because that sheet will not move. The data will change, but the sheet will not move. So it'll always be there. And this is the example for Kingdom North. I just don't know why, it just happened to be the one I pulled up. So what I've done and what I'll do over the next month is I'll continue to do is I added the origin year so that you can see the people that are new. And I also highlighted the new people. We have about 100 people statewide right now, a little bit over 100 new board members from town meeting day. And of course, we'll continue to get more. I think that I have about 30 vacancies right now, which are usually positions that no one ran for. So they'll be filled, they have 30 days to fill them. So they'll be filling them quickly. So anyhow, this is what your spreadsheets look like. This is the first page of it. This has got all your contacts in it. It's quick and easy. If you want to send everyone an email, just highlight the email column and throw it into your email. One of our strategic plan goals, as Sue said, this year is to increase our communication between regional representatives and their regional people. So I created this communication log that we can keep track of when you all send something out to people in your region, and just to help us understand what's happening out there. Just to put, it's simple, just put the date in, who sent it so that the other representative can see who sent it, and who you sent it to. If you sent it to all chairs or to new board members or whoever, and what the topic was. Doesn't have to be a lot of work for that part. The log just helps us to see when information is going out. And at this point of the year, on the third tab is the new board member sample language. You can use obviously whatever language you want. We just wanted to make it as easy as possible. So we created some sample language, just welcoming a representative to the board. As we go through the year, maybe every month or 2 months, I'll add another tab and give you some other language for things that are coming up, maybe as webinars are coming up, things like that. So if you are just looking for, like, I don't know what to send out, you can just quick grab and copy that, put it in an email and send it to whomever you want on your contact list. The last thing I'll say about it is that in the past, I've always shared these and update them once a month, but in the past they were not editable. And that's because people will go in and go, oh, she's not on that board anymore, and they'll take it off, or, oh, you know what, his email changed, or I got the email back and it changed, and they change it on here, but that's not good because when I update it, that's just going to disappear. So what's very important, I did make it editable now because you need to be able to put things into the log and stuff. But please understand not to change anything on the contact list. Instead, send me an email so I can change it in the actual database, because otherwise
lock certain parts of the spreadsheet and not others.
But I don't really want to lock it because the other problem is if I lock it, you can't sort it. Well, I can still change it, but they can't sort it. And a lot of people want to sort, like they'll just want to send something to chairs just so they can want to sort it. And that's fine, but I want them to be able to, people be able to manipulate it any way they want. Just please remember that if you change data on there, it's not gonna, it'll just revert back unless I know to change it in my database. Okay? Any questions for anybody?
Oh, thank you. This is great.
Nicely done.
Very nice.
Okay.
And the only other update I wanted to bring your attention to was that I attended the Council of School Attorneys Spring Law Seminar for 2.5 days of continuing legal education. And there were a lot of great topics. It's really valuable for me to be able to get my continuing legal education, you know, specifically on issues that are important to our members. And so some of the topics were a national school law update, recent Supreme Court cases, and how the decisions of the Supreme Court are shifting the constitutional rules under which schools operate. Section 504's evolution through case law and Office of Civil Rights decisions, the intersection of Title IX and special education, student civil rights, et cetera. They're all listed here on the report. So there's a lot of other great information in the report, but I don't want to prolong your meeting by going over it.
No, but I do want board members to review it. So please review the stuff in the monitoring report because I think it's it helps you be a better board member because you know what the staff has been doing and working on. It's just been a great tool to sort of keep tab of the progress of this organization, and continually amazed by the amount of work that such a small staff is able to get done in this organization. Also, one other item for those of you that are going to be sending out those emails, which will be all of you, right? Please remember to copy Sue and I on those emails so that we know that they've gone out. Perhaps some folks have forgotten to do that in the past. I'm gonna go with the assumption that way more emails went out than I was copied on. So as we move forward, please copy Sue and I on any of those correspondence. That way we're up to date, we know what's going on. And I'd be more than happy to then give you all kudos for sending out those emails, because then I'll know. All right. Any questions on the monitoring reports?
I have a question just for my own personal, how have you been doing this right along, or is this relatively new, this kind of monitoring report?
We have had a monitoring report for quite some time. It has been updated within the last 6 months based on the work that this board did in developing a new mission and vision.
Because we just had a new strategic plan and have been talking about, you know, how to keep it up and what's the best form, and this is very helpful.
I would argue
I love
that
this
when
one.
I first saw this years ago, this was one of the best examples that I've ever seen for how an organization can monitor
Simple,
progress on their
simple.
own strategic plan. Yeah.
Wish I could do it at my home visions.
All right, moving on to consent agenda, folks, which includes the March minutes. I will look for a motion. Tara,
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
is there a second? Second by Floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand, leave it up so we can get count. Unanimous in the room. I am seeing unanimous online as well too. Thank you, board. Moving on to new business, a couple of items there. I wanted to, for folks, Suzanne had hinted at this a little bit earlier in the meeting, some of her challenges with her reelection, and in particular, folks from the Save Our Schools movement that had sort of gained some momentum in her part of Vermont. But I just wanted to give Suzanne a moment just to let board members know, because I think it's important that you all know about this, even if it's not going on in your district, because if it isn't, it could be coming your way. Suzanne, you want to jump in from there?
Sure. So Addison County is obviously home to the Ripton school that left our district and then was the only school that was allowed their own personal on-ramp back into our school district. But part of the reason that school left our district is because the Save Our Schools movement in southern Vermont has pretty much had its roots in Ripton. It's spread into Cornwall, Weybridge, and Shoreham. And if you go on to the National Save Our Schools website, there's actually a piece on there that talks about if you want to get on the school board, what you need to do, and it talks about going out and getting people to support you, taking in contributions, getting groups, political groups to support you. They're against some forms of curriculum. They want to have a bigger say in what really a school board member should be able to have a say in. When we had some of our members, some of those members got into substituting and now seem to think that they can run not only the school board, but the schools. It's really a dangerous kind of group to be coming into the state of Vermont. When we looked at how much they had spent on races in Addison Central, some of them spent well over $10,000 trying to earn a school board seat. And they have, the Save Our Schools group has threatened to sue our school board district. They have done several public records requests, which has totally freaked out some of our board members, myself included. They also do not have a very good respect for board member roles and such. So it's definitely a group that's worth watching. They are spreading. They were also partially helpful to the Lincoln community and moving out of their district. They aren't going away, and they're just increasing their numbers. So
Thank you for that, Suzanne. So I think, the good news to report is that Suzanne survived a challenge in her local district for her reelection. So I want to applaud her for that. I think it was a little touch and go at the end there, I assume.
yeah, it was. And what ended up helping me out is that the candidate that SOS put forth to challenge me, because they had publicly stated that anybody that was not an SOS candidate, they were going after and trying to unseat. The person that they had chosen, they did not choose very well because she actually happens to be my neighbor. And when she saw what they were trying to force her to do, she decided not really to participate in their politics. So in a way that helped me, but also the fact that I guess word of mouth was my method. And I never realized how many people supported me as I did until the numbers came out. And I was the second highest vote getter in the district. So
Congratulations. And we're glad that you survived and been with us for another few years.
well, thank you. The Career Center is happy too.
Yeah.
So board members, obviously, if you have questions about this, we now have a resident expert on this topic. So please feel free to reach out to Suzanne if you run into challenges. And Barbara, you have
I was wondering whether it's appropriate for us, not for this meeting, but to look at if you say they're not going away, and this is happening all over the country, these kinds of takeovers of school boards, and maybe we should talk about some kind of plan to out them, because I don't think that, like you said, your neighbor, Sue's neighbor, didn't like what they were trying to do. I'm sure their rhetoric is a lot different from what they're really trying to do, or they have some talking points that might be attractive, but it might be just a very public discussion throughout the whole state about what this organization is doing and what their hidden agenda is, would be like with media. I mean, I don't know what it is, but we could talk about whether we should discuss that at a later meeting.
Yeah, we can certainly add that as an item for a future discussion on the board. All right. Moving on, just one other item that we had for new business. First, I know that all of you have heard already, but I want to congratulate Flor for her winning an election onto the National School Boards Association Board of Directors. At our most recent visit down in Orlando, just last week. So,
And Carrie's got a little video to
And-
show update too.
oh, and Carrie's gonna show you all. Although I don't know, is it showing in this for the Zoom folks
Yeah,
yet?
well, not yet. It will now though.
Okay,
All right. Are you ready?
here we go, Zoom folks.
You are truly, there is no more than school board members. A strong public education system is the key to dream fulfillment.
Both the group today with the drums and yesterday the cheerleading group, they were awesome. It's great to see some of the students and just a very diverse group and different things that they're doing across the country. It's amazing.
I really loved what Jenna had to say. Her being a school teacher brought in a lot. It reminded me of why I sit on the board.
Whenever I go back to a school, whenever I'm in a classroom, whenever I'm with an educator, it takes me right back to the incredible work that you all do every single day. All parents and all kids, same thing. And teachers are the ones that can help give them. Educators are the ones that can help impart them, which is just a happier, healthier, productive life.
This year's conference, we have the beautiful opportunity to have young people creating really their perfect classroom, their vision of what the space would be where they would like to learn.
There's a lot of useful information and we get to interact and ask questions. And I like that. It's better than just looking at our website, something that you might not even know you needed. When people like give you an overview of the product or whatever services they're offering, you might think, hey, yes, I do need that. I like the diversity of services and products as well. I do like it and appreciate it. I look forward to every time I go to these conventions.
For more than 25 years, the Magna Awards have recognized innovative school district programs. Please join me in congratulating our 3 grand prize winners. Windsor Central School District in New York, Florence Public Schools in Kansas, and Buffalo Public Schools in New York.
This has been an amazing conference. I am learning so much, all the way from what's going on in public education across the nation to how do we help the social and emotional needs of our staff and our students. It's been awesome.
It's all about the kids. The more you come here, you got things to take back. I just went to an awesome one on curriculum, and I'm definitely going to take that information back, but it's been great.
Thanks for,
And she's got a couple of photos.
oh, and a couple of photos, yeah,
Yes, I do.
um, go ahead and show this. I don't know, Flora, did you want to, just, share a little bit about, the conference with folks?
Yeah, and I had put some pictures of Neil
Uh,
together to head up with a slideshow too.
I don't know if they can
Oh,
see.
yeah,
Can you guys
Carrie's
see that on
got-
Zoom?
Oh, just got what?
All right, people on Zoom, can you see the pictures when I share them or not?
yes,
Yeah.
you just, was there a second ago?
All we saw was an orange screen, but before that, we saw the video.
It's not the video. Well, it won't let me show the picture. I can show it in a room, but I don't think I can show it on.
Okay, we can show it in the room and Flora can talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
First, I wanted to say, thank you for the emails that I have received, but most important that, I was not standing in that stage that day alone. There's been a lot of people that have, including the board that have supported me for the years. So first of all, thank you. And thank you for, doing, doing this, for all of us to have a seat at the table at the national level and, do what is best for kids. The conference was, I always get so excited about what we can share and learn. There were many conversations, even the informal ones that highlight the differences of governing that we have across the entire nation. And then I participated on the first, I was just observant at my first National School Boards Association meeting. I came in a day early and just sat through the meeting and basically was just a closing of that year of it. So it was not a lot of business. It was just mostly taking stock of what has happened in the last year. You guys all have heard what happened with the National School Boards Association and how many states we have lost. And then the next few days, we participated on the resolutions. Vermont had, I can put my pictures up if you want. Vermont had a central seat resolutions that we meant, and the recent resolutions was the committee that I was assigned to last year. And we did that work in BC, and this year we were just all voting. We have 2 delegates from Vermont, and it's been Neil and myself. It's the president and vice president. And we voted, but there was not much discussion because we are now into like little silos, right? There's a different organization that was having their conversations in Tampa at the same time that we were getting together in Orlando. So, you know, they had created their own playground or sandbox, I call it, because we can all play together. So part of being part of this organization would be, how do we have this conversation, right? We both lose by not being together. We can't plant seeds, and we also can't have those important conversations, right? Like real conversations, because it was very, everything just passed, not like previous years where you actually had, even if you're hitting your head against the wall, you're like having a conversation about what's kids. And then Harwood, the other things to highlight was Harwood. We had the opportunity to spend some time with Mike, who's the superintendent, Harwood. What is it, district? Yeah, Harwood. Yeah, Harwood district, and Kathy, who is already retired, but she had been doing the work. The Hartman.
It's called the Harkness Initiative. Yeah, and they won a Silver Magna Award.
Yeah, so they were not in the big stage, but they were part of a smaller ceremony, which was just as lovely. And they worked at, the schools are doing this amazing. And it was so amazing to have somebody from Vermont for the first time and be part of that. And we got to have lunch with them and hear more about it. And we're hoping that we can present at a conference in the fall and help us lead some important conversations using the heart method. Did I say that right? What else? What else am I forgetting? And then we had the big, there's a lot of sort of procedures and rehearsals. The president walked the stage for the second time, which is just the second time that Vermont has ever done it. Didn't use it, but it's not. And then on Monday, Monday, already left, but Monday was the official, so I became a member on Saturday. I'm trying to remember now. On Friday, but the official was Monday. So Monday, the new board walked on the stage, and then after a couple of presentations, the guy that developed Siri, Adam, I'm forgetting his last name, presented at a conference on artificial intelligence. Basically, just had a conversation with the entire what was left of the conference. Is a little strange how they wait up to the last day to do.
When a lot of people have left already.
Yeah, a lot of people had left because the fear is stretched to Monday. And then we went and I had my first official meeting before leaving. And I got appointed to 2 committees. So I'll be in the audit committee, but I'll be in the beliefs and resolution committee, which is we actually wanted to be, and you don't get a say. They appointed. I was in that last year, but the president appoints. Looks at the board and they appoint the members, and you just get a list of where you're going to be. That was it. I want to show you a picture of.
Probably.
I made you the host, so you can show your
Got
screen.
share privileges on Zoom. So what I will add to what Flor presented was sort of an action item for this board. I've never been extremely satisfied with sort of how we have handled the voting at NSBA. So the NSBA conference functions almost exactly the same way as our VSBA conference does. Day 1 is their version of our delegate assembly, where they vote on changes to the Constitution and bylaws and also beliefs and resolutions. And every year I've gone in and we've cast a vote based on sort of what I felt this body, how they would vote. but we haven't ever formally taken them up as a board collectively to then say, okay, voting delegates, here's how we would like you to vote. So as we go into next year's conference, my plan is to bring those beliefs and resolutions that are being proposed, as well as any changes to the Constitution and bylaws of the VSBA, bring them before this body so that you all get a chance to look at them, review them, and then we can develop a VSBA position on these items. So then as your delegate, as your representative goes in, we know how to cast our votes. Certainly we'll ask for your authorization because sometimes there's amendments that are made from the floor and on the fly. So we'll get your, approval so that the delegates can cast their ballots, if stuff comes up from the floor. But that's one procedural item that I wanted to bring back to VSBA that I hope to change over the next year. Mark.
Well, I was just curious, what's the discussion? Are states dropping out of this organization because of some of these movements?
Yes. And it's been, to some degree, it's been substantial, right? So I believe right now, Sue, I don't know if you have.
It's like a public education pushback or?
So this was a pushback that was related to the specifics or a letter that was sent from the National School Boards Association to the Biden administration back beginning mid-COVID. I think we had shared that with everyone here. Yep, so that letter was sent to the Biden administration, basically requesting that the administration, I believe, offer assistance to school boards nationwide based on the increase in hostility and safety concerns that board members had at school board meetings because things were starting to ramp up a little bit. Some members of the media grabbed a hold of that statement and twisted the message a little bit to essentially say that, well, look, school boards don't want parents involved in their child's education, and that there are a whole bunch of other nefarious things going on. That prompted several states to actually leave the National School Boards Association. And a lot of those states now have banded together to form a splinter or a parallel organization called COSBA, which I think is called like the Coalition of State School Board Associations or something like that. It was kind of, I don't know, ironic is the word. They were holding their annual conference at exactly the same time in another state in Florida. So, one of the challenges is
what Florida is doing for education.
Well, so trust me, that point was not was at the conference that the location of this was, something I think that had been agreed to quite a while previously. But Flora is right that one of the challenges that we have right now is that the states that remain in NSBA, we tend to be of like mind on a lot of the issues, right? And the way that sort of manifests itself, however, is really a lack of conversation, a lack of disagreement, a lack of challenging each other's thoughts and ideas on these things. And so, for example, all of the beliefs and resolutions that were presented this year were assembled into a consent agenda and passed in record time. There was actually zero discussion on a lot of things. Similarly, with the changes to the Constitution and bylaws, those passed rather pro forma as well too.
So we have a balkanization of the school boards, just the way we have balkanization of everything else in this country.
Yes. So yes, you could say that. Yeah, this is.
So that's too bad.
In essence, this is not necessarily that much different than our nation as a whole.
To save our schools versus we can do whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Or go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the resolutions and the changes to the bylaws, they get discussed in January. So this was, you've heard from us that this was the first year that we're not to DC in January, where the advocacy and equity symposium and because last year I was assigned to the beliefs and resolutions without having the hat of NSBA, but as the the Northeast representative, so at that meeting, the resolutions were discussed between the people in that committee from several different states, divided into two. So they were discussed, but it's lost at when we bring it to then we bring it to everybody, which is really unfortunate. And, you know, and a lot of people right now feel like it's okay to stay like that because you would just have two good organizations doing good things for kids, but you can if you are, you know, not talking about all the issues that kids are facing, which is sad. But I was trying to run it as a slideshow, but it was not letting me. So this was Vermont. There's Neil and myself right after the. I don't know if you guys can see up there. That was the conference. There's Frank giving his speech, which I thought is just 2 minutes, but I know it's also late, so I'm not gonna play it right now. But and then I don't know if you guys have watched elementary, but the series, this is the principal in the elementary series in Netflix that sort of a lot of people are really represents that all of the real issues that are on schools. This is similar to what you saw in the slide. The art was just beautiful. What the kids were doing, their suit.
Oh.
On the big screen. In the big screen. This also had a little play, but it's 18 seconds, so it might, I don't know, so they were so good.
I think we're from the state of Washington.
Yeah, and I think with, and same with the cheerleaders, what they were saying, it was that there was a diversity of ability, not just. Let me mute myself now, otherwise I'm not, sorry. Right, walking there, I should make this very small. Well, it's up there better. Yeah, see if I'll let me, and here's Mike from Harwood and Kathy. And there's the president of National School was giving them the award.
And you had good weather.
We had good weather. We unfortunately we did, this is cool. But unfortunately it was just like, it's one meeting after another because there's a lot of sessions that you don't want to miss. And that's the other thing, that there's a lot of states that are not part of NSBA anymore, but they're still choosing to take the classes. So we have opened it up so that there were a lot of people from Chicago, there are a lot of people from California, from Texas, that are not part of the organization. So that's sort of how they're trying to balance that. So, you know, they're not part of the resolutions conversation, right? But at least they're attending. So when you are at the lectures, you're able to at least have some conversations. That was right after the awards with them.
No golfing. There was no golfing.
There was no golfing.
Time for
And
golfing.
that's the new board for next year. And yeah, for 2020.
And you're up there?
2024. And I'm right there in between. Super. I don't know if you can see me there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, but I was saying there's 3 guys that talked about, hey, there's Frank, who stepped down, but he would still be part of the board next year, past president. And that was my first meeting. Before we left.
Exciting.
So,
Sure.
board, unless we had anything else.
No.
So board, I want to thank you for hanging out with us tonight. We're a little over time, but I think it was worth it. Anybody needs anything or would like to see anything on a future agenda, please don't hesitate to reach out.
You want to mention the retreat
Oh, yeah.
at the daytime meeting?
Don't forget the retreat because it's a daytime meeting in June. So it's the same day as our regular board meeting, but instead of an evening meeting, it's during the day.
Also Wednesday.
It's Wednesday the
It's
14th.
Wednesday,
June
June
14th.
14th, Flag Day, I believe.
And it's
And
gonna
it's
be
gonna
a
be
Killington.
Killington, yeah.
And it's gonna be at Killington, Flag Day at Killington. And
Usually starts about 9,
yeah,
goes till 3.
Three-ish, yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Chance
And-
that's pretty well.
And I will cover the first round for anybody that's there in person, not round of golf, round of drinks. Round of drinks for anyone that attends in person.
Also, there'll be a.
Starting at 9.
Will there be a virtual option?
I don't think there will be a virtual. one.
Very,
We'll have to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I don't have anything else for this evening, so I will look for a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Moved by All right. Seconded by Suzanne. All those in favor, just head on out. Have a good evening. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
June 4th.
It has been so long, I don't know. In here. Are they always the what, the second?